What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing. The Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series will continue its conversation with you concerning the complete history of boxing. On September 7th of 1908, Spring Valley's Illinois Thunderbolt, Billy Papke, stood 5 foot 9 inches. He was a middleweight and fought from 1906 to 1919. He had a fighting record of 42-3. Where he knocked out the world middleweight champion Stanley Ketchel, who was known as the Michigan Assassin, in 12 rounds. The contest was scheduled for 25 rounds. They would fight at the Vernon Arena, and guess who the referee was? James J. Jeffries. On September 7th, the world featherweight champion, Little Hebrew, Abe Attell, goes 32 rounds, and they would call it a draw. It was in his defense of his title against Owen Moran. Now, Abe Attell remains champion, and the contest took place at the Coma in California. September 9th, Durbin, battling Nelson, knocks out old master Joe Gans in 21 rounds at the Coma, California arena. And what was amazing about this contest, Joe Gans was rumored to say to hell with it. On November 1st, future light heavyweight champion, 14-year-old Orchard man, George Carpentier, would make his professional debut as he would win on a foul against Ed Salmon in 13 rounds in France. November 26, once again, 1908, world middleweight champion, Michigan Assassin Stanley Ketchel knocks out Billy Papke in 11 rounds in Coma, California, and he would regain his middleweight championship belt. On December 21st of 1908, the colored world middleweight and heavyweight champion, Sam Langford, knocks out fireman Jim Finn in 1 round. The contest took place in San Francisco, California. And Jim Flynn would lay on that dirt road, if you will, for 7 minutes straight. Because that's how hard he was knocked out by Sam Langford. Now, December 26th of 1908, the colored heavyweight champion becomes the first black world heavyweight champion in boxing history. Jack Johnson would knock out world champion Tommy Burns, stopping him in 14 rounds. The establishment did not want this record to be in their state, or their country, if you will. Contest took place in Australia. And so they would shut off the camera before Tommy Bell would hit the canvas. You see, that's the unfair treatment that Jack Johnson would receive. That's the unfair treatment that the establishment would give other ethnicities during that time. We're talking boxing, and we're talking history, so we have to call it what it is. And unfortunately, Jack Johnson didn't get the credit that evening that he should have received. It wasn't until 1 to 2 to 3 days later that others would find out who the new champion truly was. And that's unfortunate. Now, Tommy Burns has ties with the Eastern assassin, Larry Holmes. With 8 title defenses, he would end his reign in Sydney, Australia. Now, January 6th of 1909, the former world Canadian-born Little Chocolate bantamweight featherweight champion, 38-year-old George Dixon, would die in New York. Now, they would place him in a facility for those who, what they would call the nut house, if you will. It was Bellevue Hospital. And that's a shame because George Dixon was very intelligent during his time. George Dixon was born July 29th, 1870, in Halifax, Canada. He weighed 120 pounds. He stood 5'3.5" and he was managed by Tom O'Rourke. He became the first world black champion, bantamweight, June 27th, when he took on Nuke Wallace. And what was incredible, he weighed 113 pounds, and he was wearing 4-ounce gloves in that contest. He won the featherweight championship title March 31st of 1891, when he would defeat Cal McCarthy. September 6, 1892, he defeats Jack Skelly in the Carnival of Champions. He was a wonderful fighter. He was the only fighter that I know of in history that participated in 2 of fight to the death matches. He had well over 1,000 fights. He discovered shadowboxing. George Dixon was a remarkable fighter. He would pass away on the night of January 6, 1909. January 14th, 1909, the world featherweight champion Abe Patel knocks out Freddie Weeks, in 10 rounds. They fought at Goldfield, Nevada, and he remained the featherweight champion of the world. February 4th of 1909, the world featherweight champion Abe Patel knocks out Eddie Kelly in 7 rounds in New Orleans, Louisiana. He would remain the featherweight champion in boxing history. Once again, I am reciting this at the top of my head. If I do stumble, please forgive me. I choose to do it this way. It's more authentic. I am not looking at any monitors. I'm not reading anything. I'm just having a conversation with you about the history of boxing. So I just want you to keep that in mind as I converse with you on a sport that I dearly love. On February 11th of 1909, world heavyweight champion is born. His name is Max Baer. He was born in Omaha, Nebraska. But then he would reside in California, Livermore, California. Max Baer would become the world heavyweight champion when he knocks out Primo Carnera in New York's Madison Square Garden. It was the New York Madison Square Garden Bowl. And what was the jinx of that arena? No champion has ever defended his title in that arena. He knocked him out in 11 rounds. It was 11 knockdowns combined in that fight. And Max Baer would say to Primo Carnera, last one up is a rotten egg. We'll talk more about Max Baer as his reign will begin in the 1930s. February 19th of 1909, Cardiff, Wales, United Kingdom. Jim Driscoll, who was a very good fighter, gives the world featherweight champion, Little Hebrew, Abe Patel, a pure boxing lesson. Abe Patel was not KO'd, so he would remain champion. It was a no-decision contest, prearranged somewhat. If you didn't knock him out, he would remain champion. But he was totally outboxed and outclassed. March 26th of 1909, the world middleweight champion, Michigan assassin Stanley Ketchel, would knock out light heavyweight Philadelphia Jack O'Brien in the travels, and he KO'd him in the 10th round. What was amazing about Stanley Ketchel is this man could punch. My God. He was a phenomenal fighter and phenomenal puncher. March 26th of 1909, the world featherweight champion, Abe Patel, KOs Frankie White in 8 rounds. And that was a remarkable fight. April 17th of 1909, West Hoboken Ironman Jeremiah Joe Jeanette. He was remarkable. He had a record of 66, 13, 9, and 52 knockouts. Sam McVeigh. He was a hell of a fighter. These two men would mix it up. On April 17th, 1909, in my opinion, was the greatest heavyweight championship fight of all times. Now, Sam McVeigh was from San Diego, California. He was known as the Oxnard Cyclone. McVeigh faced Sam Langford 15 times, battling Jim Johnson 7 times, Harry Wills 5 times, Jack Johnson 3 times. Joe Jeanette goes down 27 times and 3.5 hours of brutal contact. Paris, France. While almost being knocked out in the 16th round, Sam McVeigh went down 19 times himself. Now, here's the thing. Sam McVeigh was actually knocked down 11 times, and Joe Jeanette was knocked down 27 times, for a total of 32 knockdowns. But there was a couple of slips in that particular match, and it brought it up to 19 times he was down, but he was officially knocked down 11 times, and Joe Jeanette 27 times. Be that as it may, Sam McVeigh could not breathe, and they would place a paper bag over his head. Now, they protested in the corner, and Sam McVeigh said that there's no rule stating we cannot place a paper bag over his head because he literally couldn't breathe. He was going to have a heart attack. And they were dousing a bucket of water over Joe Jeanette's head, and McVeigh's camp had complained about that. After the 49th round, Joe Jeanette would claim victor as McVeigh was unable to continue. Joe Jeanette he helped carry Sam McVeigh back over to his corner. From 1904 to 1922, Joe Jeanette would have a record of 106 wins, 68 knockouts. Once again, he was a remarkable fighter. Now, one more thing on George Dixon. He would win the Bantamweight Championship title twice and defended it twice. He was involved in 34 championship bouts. He won the Featherweight Championship title 3 times and challenged once and defended it 25 times. This man was something else. He was phenomenal. Once again, shout out to George Dixon. My God. Now, on May 24th, 1909, the Boston Bone crusher Sam Langford knocks out Iron Hugh in 4 rounds. The contest took place at the National Sporting Club, the Covent Gardens. The referee was Eugene Corey. He counts out Hugh 1 minute and 59 seconds of the 4th round for the British Heavyweight Championship title. May 29th of that year, World Lightweight Champion Barry Nelson knocks out Fighting Dick Hyan 23 rounds at Coma, California, and he retains his title once owned by Joe Gans. June 9th of 1909, the World Middleweight Champion Stanley Ketchel knocks out Light Heavyweight Champion Philadelphia Jack O'Brien. It was a non-title fight. Title was not on the line. June 19th, featherweight Monty Attell, who was the brother of Abe Attell. Monty Attell would knock out Frankie Neal in 18 rounds. Now remember the name Frankie Neal. He had about 15 title opportunities. I mean, this is amazing. Now, he would win the vacant Bantamweight Championship title. I mean, it's just incredible. June 21st of 1909, the World Featherweight Champion, Barry Nelson, knocks out Jack Clifford in 5 rounds. It was his defense of his title in Coma, California. June 26th of 1909, Fighting Dick Hyland knocks out the Fighting Dick's Leech Cross, 41 rounds in Coma, California. This was the longest fight that was performed. You know, and just the other day I was looking at some scrapbooks. I pulled out some bare knuckle scrapbooks, and I came across the early 1900s. And I was looking at Leech Cross, who was the fighting dentist, lived in New York. And I remember my friend Teddy. I had a friend named Teddy. He knew all of them guys because he lived on the Lower East Side. on Cherry Street. In fact, he lived across in the next building from Ruby Goldstein, who was a referee, a famous referee. They were all in the Jewish community at that time. And he was telling me about a lot of the Jewish fighters who he would go to the barbershops with and play pool with and so on and so forth. But he told me about Daniel Mendoza. Now that was a little bit before, obviously it was before his time, but he knew of him. And Daniel Mendoza was the first Jewish champion, and he was a master boxer. He put the scientific name on scientific boxing. It wasn't Jim Corbett, but it was Daniel Mendoza. He was a phenomenal fighter. But he was the first Jewish champion in boxing history. Now, July 5th, 1909, Stanley Ketchel defeats the Illinois Thunderbolt, Billy Papke, in 20 rounds, Coma, California. It was in defense of his middleweight championship crown. July 13th, at War Gas and Bally Nelson squares off 10 rounds, no decision contest in Los Angeles, California. September 8th, Jack Johnson and Al Kaufman go 10 rounds, and in no decision contest, Jack Johnson remains the world heavyweight champion in California. That was a prearranged, it was an agreement fight. Jack Johnson would not attempt to knock out Al Kaufman. Al Kaufman would not attempt to knock out Jack Johnson. That same agreement package was offered to Stanley Ketchel in 1910. October 16th, world heavyweight champion Jack Johnson and world middleweight champion Stanley Ketchel participate in a promotional championship contest. In the second round, Jack Johnson tags Stanley Ketchel with a simple punch, but because Jack Johnson was so heavy-handed, it affected Stanley Ketchel where it would not affect another heavyweight at that time. And he tags him with a straight right hand. And Stanley Ketchel would go down. He dusted himself off as he got up. He was very upset. And he said, to hell with this. First opportunity I see, I'm going for it. And he would do that. Unfortunately for Stanley Ketchel, it was not in the script. You see, this fight was for movie rights. It was somewhat of an exhibition, but it counted on Jack Johnson's championship record, if you will. And Ketchel gets up. He continues fighting round 3, round 7. Both men would mix it up. And Stanley Ketchel just swung an overhand right. He saw an opening and he dropped Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson immediately gets up. He dusts himself off. And he realizes there's some teeth embedded in his glove. So he went right to Stanley Ketchel. Stanley Ketchel's expression based on reports. Aw, damn. And he tags him, goes down, crucifixion style. He looked like a snow angel on that canvas. And he was out. Phenomenal story. Jack Johnson, Stanley Ketchel. A few fights after, Stanley Ketchel would be in a ring with Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, with John O'Sullivan, with Abe Attell, with Bob Fitzsimmons, and many others, as they would support the Boilermaker Jim Jeffries and Reno, Nevada, because they wanted Jack Johnson no longer to become champion. And unfortunately for those men, James Jeffries would be knocked out in 15 rounds. Now, to give you some more information on that Stanley Ketchel-Jack Johnson fight, Jack Johnson wanted 20 rounds because of the money that he would make. Johnson requested, and he would receive 65% of the gate. Stanley Ketchel would receive the balance, which was 35% of the gate. The promoter was Jim Crawford, who was in the ring with all those fighters that I mentioned. And he changed the fight date from Tuesday, October 12th, 1909 to Saturday, October 16th, 1909. Because he felt that he would make more money. And this would be the fourth defense of Jack Johnson's World Heavyweight Championship title. Both men had to put up $5,000 side bets because they wanted to make sure that neither man were involved in any funny business. Jack Johnson weighed 205 pounds. He was a 10-4 favorite in that contest. Stanley Ketchel weighed 166 pounds. The attendance was 10,000 and 3,000 were reportedly turned away. You couldn't fit any more in that section where they held the fight. In the ninth round, Stanley Ketchel was a bloody mess due to Johnson's left hook. He was no competition for Jack Johnson. When the fight was over, Stanley Ketchel didn't quite know where he was, but Stanley Ketchel would eventually meet up with Jack Johnson. And he would tell Jack Johnson, not only are you a hell of a fighter, but you're a hell of a human being. Those were the last words that Jack Johnson would hear from Stanley Ketchel. These two men were friends. They understood and knew one another. Stanley Ketchel had a brother who, and his father and his mother, they all were suicide and killing father, and it was just too much. If Stanley Ketchel would be killed by a fighter who was a farmer, and his name was Walter Dipley. He did a little boxing in his time. And he didn't like the fact that Stanley Ketchel would be flirting with a saloon woman who happened to be a common law wife of Walter Dipley. And Stanley Ketchel would be shot in the back. November 23rd, Sam Langford, the Boston Bone Crusher, knocks out Mike Schrick, 1 round, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It's actually Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. November 29th, lightweight Ad Wargas defeats Lou Powell in 20 rounds in San Francisco, California. December 17th, bantamweight Monty Attell draws 20 rounds with Danny Weber in San Francisco, California. December 27th, heavyweight White Hope Big Bill Lang knocks out Bob Fitzsimmons in 12 rounds, Sydney, Australia. Bob Fitzsimmons was 46 years of age that evening. I'm Scrapbook Boxing, the Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. All great fights and all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel. On my next video, I'm going to show you some scrapbooks. Look out for the next video. Thanks for watching. Be well.